How death became life. Death was born on a flaming day. At least that was the way she remembered it. And when she came forth full grown into the world, it was a light with all the colours of fire. The light seemed to come from a sword which an immense angel held aloft, guarding a door to she knew not where. At first, Death felt like a stranger. She wandered kind of lost. Then one day she saw a beautiful bird with gorgeous white plumage. Gently she walked up to it and stretched out her hand to feel the softness of the feathers, which shone like the sun on the bird's back. But no sooner had her fingers touched it than the bird fell at her feet, cold and still. Death picked it up and wondered why it had stopped singing and stopped living. And that was how she discovered her dreaded power. And that is how she understood why she had been born on a flaming day. Slowly, the years flowed into eternity, where all time goes, and death travelled through them, all touching now this animal and that bird, and this fish or that flower. But then she knew the earth very well, and she had noticed that a certain kind of creature, human beings, dwelt on it, who still held in their faces a strange reflection of God. It was as though they had been made in the image of God. Death took a long time to touch humankind, but one day she did, and she saw them shudder. They cried out and became as cold and still as the first bird with the white plumage that she touched. And on that day, Death tasted the fullness of her awesome power. But on that day also, she knew loneliness to the very last drop. From then on, as the centuries turned into thousands of years and thousands of years into millions, Death claimed all living things for her own. Yet there was in her a huge hunger that grew. In her silent kingdom, nothing remained. All living things crumbled and turned into dust at her touch. She was always left with loneliness. There were days, years even, when Death almost went mad with loneliness and the desire to have and to hold something that would last, someone or something that she could call her own. With tears flowing down her emaciated cheeks, it was the time of great storms and floods. Death crisscrossed the whole earth with a swiftness born of frenzied hunger. Throwing herself at the children of human beings, she embraced them passionately, hoping against hope that she might see a smile or hear a word that would fill the pall of the loneliness, which isolated her from all living things and held her tighter and tighter. But she learned that human beings feared her above all things. They shrank from her approach. They invented thousands of legends about her, trying to pretend that she was really incapable of harming them. They even began to imagine a life after death that was somehow a continuation of the earthly life that they know here. Slowly the legends that they made up grew into religious beliefs and centered on ways and means of escaping death. Their attempts left a wide trail of artifacts scattered over the earth, and other humans would dig in the bowels of the earth to trace the trail. But death kept walking the earth. At times she smiled at human beings' subtle fear of her, and she enjoyed her power over them. At other times she wept bitterly, not only because she was lonely, but because she sensed that there are always some part of each human being that seemed to escape her. One day, tired and weary, she sat on a hill beneath 3 crosses, on which 3 men were being executed. She did not feel like looking at or touching any of these. She was too tired, and she was too lonely, and she was too disconsolate. So she just sat there, her weary head in her hands, and she wept slow, huge tears, bemoaning her loneliness. Suddenly, above her head, she heard a voice say, "I thirst." She looked up. Her gaze met 2 fathomless eyes. From their depths flowed a brilliant, warm blue light, the likes of which she had never experienced before. Instantly she stood up, rigid, erect, tall and thin. A few paces away, this man hung between 2 others. She somehow did not dare to look at him, though she wanted, more than she had ever wanted, to touch him, and to touch him with love and respect. Yet, very self-consciously, she put her hands behind her back and stared at this bleeding, disfigured face, as if she could never see enough. She heard him speak some short sentences. Each word she locked into her heart. She relished them. The very echo of the voice, weak with pain and hunger, moved her deeply. Then he was silent, but his eyes called to her in a wordless message. She did not know how it happened, but gently, ever so gently, she touched his cheek. He seemed for an instant to smile for her alone. Then, like all the others before him, he closed his eyes and became lifeless and cold. Death could not believe it. Somehow, she knew without knowing that he was different from all the others. So she lingered a while. She saw him taken down from the cross. She saw his mother hold his lifeless body in her arms and cradle the ashen face against her bosom. She saw him being carried into a grave in the hollow of a cave. She saw some soldiers roll the stone to the entrance of the cave in order to seal it. Then, fleet of foot and noiseless as only death can be, she entered the cave just before the stone was put in place. What passed between him and death, no human being will ever know. But one thing is certain. On the following Sunday, 2 days after he had been taken down from his cross, some women came to the tomb and it was empty. Death was not there. And since that Sunday morning, all who look upon death with the eyes of faith see it differently. They know that love is life, and death is now but the gate to eternal life.